everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Just Feminism, where we try to answer some simple yet complicated questions like what is feminism, what are feminists, what do feminists do, and can feminism actually change the world? Well, the guest of this series will show by example that not only does feminism have potential to change the world, they're actively doing it. My name is Aurora, I'll be your host, and joining me today is Tammy, an immigration lawyer from the US, who has a lot of amazing stuff to say about her own personal experiences, but also the systems of immigration policies that keep people in disadvantaged positions, that leave people in the risk of, being victims of certain types of crime and stuff like that. And we'll also be talking about stuff that we all can do to make sure that people feel as welcome and as supported as they should be when trying to, create a life from scratch to obtain a standard of living that is, acceptable and that we all should have the right to have. If you enjoyed watching this, make sure to leave a like and maybe even subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. This is my dog, demure. She's very energetic today, so I only wonder what this episode will look like, but it's very fitting and you will see why. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into this episode. Hi!
Long time no see!
Yeah! Oh my god, she heard. Come on!
I was gonna say, how's that Miriam? Hi, girl! Oh, how's she doing?
Well, she's okay. She's still battling with epilepsy and stuff, but we're okay.
That's a good girl.
Well, thank you for being here with me today to talk about immigration, a very, very important topic that, is connected to so many people, to so many policies. History is history of migration. Let's be real, because civilization has always been on the move, trying to find the best chance for all of us to have a living conditions and a stable life. We all deserve that. So thank you for being here with me today to talk about it.
Of course. You guys are in Canada. It's still what happens here. Everyone else in the world also dreads.
We actually met a year ago while traveling to the United States by boat with our dogs.
Story could be a whole different discussion of being on a Queen Mary 2 with our dogs. Not even my dog. It was my best friend's dog, but still. Yeah. Migration story, right? You guys were moving all the way to Canada, and my friend's dog was moving back to the United States. It was definitely a migration story.
Yeah, it really was. So it's fascinating that we met that way and that now we're continuing to talk about it a year later. So I'm very happy to be able to do so. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking me.
For starters, can you please tell me a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, what do you do, and how did you end up working with immigration?
I grew up in Texas, and I grew up during the times when we had, I don't know if you know Governor Ann Richards. If not, look her up. She was amazing. Her daughter, Cecile Richards, actually recently stepped down from being the head of Planned Parenthood nationally. But Ann Richards was a fiery woman from Texas that was a Democrat. And so that was kind of the background. A daughter of immigrants, and just born and raised in Texas. And, I came in Houston. Houston's a very diverse city. It's actually the most diverse city in all of the US. And a lot of folks might think New York, LA, but it's actually Houston. So I didn't realize a lot of that until later when I started practicing immigration law, about where a lot of the folks were coming. And a lot of the folks coming to the US or that I knew in high school were not much different from my own parents. My mother's family, they fled China during their Civil War, and she was only 2 years old. My grandmother was pregnant, my 1-year-old uncle, and they had to cross the border into Hong Kong. And I actually, she passed away 13 years ago, but found papers that, say refugee resettlement in Hong Kong. Her story is very much the story of everyone in the world, like we had talked about just previously. Back those days, England was recruiting young girls in Hong Kong to be nurses. And so when she was 17, she moved to England with just a suitcase and some money. I'm not sure when she was going to see her parents again, but the goal was to immigrate her family to England. And while there, she worked in a mental institution, which made sense why when I was really into British music. She told me that British people all like to talk to themselves and all are a little bit crazy. Later, I realized she worked in an actual mental institution and had, padded walls and all this stuff. So she met a very nice gentleman who's Japanese Hawaiian, and they got married and she immigrated to the US, and that was late 60s, early 70s. Didn't work out with that marriage, had my older sister, got divorced, and she ended up in Texas, which is where my father was. And my father actually came as a student to the United States. And that's also that could be a whole nother topic, but long story short, on my father's side from Taiwan, they'd been there since the 1600s. But my oldest uncle, he worked for the Taiwanese consulate in Mexico, was threatened by the Chinese government, and was relocated to the closest embassy consulate, which was in Houston, Texas at the time. And so my father left his career as a veterinarian to study English in the US. Met my mother because of my grandmother working as a dishwasher in a Chinese restaurant. And that's where the story led to me. So my mother was a nurse at one point. My dad was a veterinarian. They opened up Chinese restaurants, and I grew up in that. And the goal for them was to make sure that I was going to do better than what they did, which is a very common story over and over again, especially with my clients. So that was a very long, convoluted story about my background.
That's beautiful. It's a very rich history of your family, coming from all over the places, searching for that beautiful life that they deserve, and then you came out of it. They're present for it. But yeah, I agree. There is that issue of immigrant children having that pressure of having to succeed and fulfill the dreams of their parents and do everything their parents never could have because it was just not possible for them. But that can put some restraints on the people, because then some of your dreams are not your own because they're of your parents, or just the expectations to always be the best can be very harmful and toxic and lead to burnout and stuff.
And therapy helps a lot, which is great that everyone now openly talks about therapy. But growing up, my parents basically said, doctor, lawyer. I wanted to be a journalist at one point when I was in elementary school. My mother said, you'll never make any money in that. And I don't think, you're probably too young, but there was a journalist named Connie Chung, who was the only Chinese, very much seen on mainstream news in the United States at that time. My mother's like, you'll never be Connie Chung. There's only one Connie Chung. So I pivoted, and I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then my mother said, if you're going to do all that schooling, you should be helping people. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I mean, I do want to help people, just not, blood and all that stuff. So ended up getting into being interested in politics and the law, and looking into going to be a lawyer, which is all very fortuitous. But when I started working at a nonprofit after law school, my mother, I think, was disappointed that I wasn't making a lot of money. And so then later she had said to me, while we were just driving somewhere, she said, you should have been a veterinarian. And I was like, that's what I wanted to do in the beginning. So, but it's immigrant parents. You're always trying to please them somehow. It's never enough, but it's fine. It helped in my drive to keep doing more. And so in law school, I knew I wanted to do something with nonprofits, public interest. Mostly I was thinking civil rights work. I fell into doing immigration after I was waiting for my license results, my bar results. I kind of just fell into it and got very fortunate to later do from business immigration to working at a nonprofit and building their asylum and immigration program. And then within the past 2 years, just got very fortunate that the professor at the local law school's immigration clinic retired, and they approached me to take over and expand kind of the cases that these students will be able to experience, more asylum cases, more court cases. So I split, I do that part-time while running my full-time business of just myself being an attorney, but I like the challenge.
Yeah, it sounds great. I love how it was not a straightforward path. It's not, from childhood, this is the thing that you're going to be doing, so you end up in it, but you're doing the most of it, and you're led by some principles that are turned to the clients, that you put in place to protect them, to provide them humanity, to why okay.
Oh, she wants to be a part of this.
It's important discussion and she has to participate. She knows what it's like to be an international doggo and an immigrant.
It's well traveled. She's better traveled than my dog.
Thank you. Where was I? Yeah, in your practice, you have a private practice, right? So you have some principles that you have in place to make your clients feel human, to make them feel respected and heard and things like that. So what are some of those things that you do to make the clients feel welcome in your space?
A lot of my experience with my clients in my private practice now stems from a lot of the work I did at the NGO, right, at the nonprofit, where they were getting services for free because they couldn't afford an attorney. But I learned early on as a new attorney, like I probably did a little bit above and beyond what most attorneys would do, because it was almost like social work as well. Because everything's very intertwined. Like they may need help with their immigration or asylum cases, but they also need a place to stay, and they also need, so it really helped in developing relationships with the local community, and knowing some of the other NGOs and who's helping who, and all the immigrant advocates and things like that. Now in my practice, that kind of transfers into that. I approach it from a very different angle than maybe some other private attorneys, where it's about a business and overhead and making sure that they expand and profit. For me, I've always known, because I saw them when I worked for almost 9 years at the nonprofit, that a lot of these folks will be indebted to try to get the money to pay for an attorney, or they can't pay it all at once. So I actually joke that I'm still basically like a nonprofiteer. I try to keep my fees very affordable, and I let them do monthly payments at a very low monthly payment comparatively to other folks that I know, and I'm fine with it. All of my clients are referral based, so I don't advertise. I always ask them, like, who do you know? And it'll be some clients from a long time ago. It'll be folks that maybe I didn't even help them with their things. I might have had an interaction with them where I said, this is what's going to happen, but they felt like they could trust me enough to refer me, that I would be honest for other people. And that's really where my kind of ethos comes with my practice is, yeah, I could probably charge and take a lot of cases and make a lot of money, but I don't want to waste people's money or waste their expectations of what it is and isn't attainable. So I tell people, and I say, look, yeah, you could pay for this, but it's not going to go anywhere unless something changes in laws. Just be careful who you talk to, because I've seen a lot of people get scammed, because ultimately it's all about hope, right? They're hopeful that there is something where they can mitigate their legal status here and eventually have some type of permanent residency or something. And we talked about this, I don't even know if you were recording at the time, but everyone just wants stability. Everyone wants to be able to just, in the grand scheme of things, be able to have a roof over their head, feed themselves, provide for their families. And everyone's hard workers. Like the ones that are coming, we talked a little bit before the recording about kind of the rhetoric during the presidential debate in the US against immigrants. It's not anything new, this whole eating dogs thing. Unfortunately, even, grew up in Texas, there was a lot of kind of this racial dog whistles, pun intended. But when we moved to San Diego, my father was walking our dog Homer, his little Jack Russell Terrier. And later he told me that some teenagers in the car drove by and yelled out, "Don't eat your dog." My dad's just like, why would I eat my dog? That's weird. So this rhetoric amongst the Haitians from that, from the presidential candidate is unfortunate, not unusual, but I think all we can do is really to combat it is to denounce it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Such imagery is very dangerous, because especially in today's age with social media and everything, it became a meme. less than 24 hours after the debate, we saw so many people joking about, yeah, I'm an immigrant, here's me eating my dog, which is them reclaiming that status and say, you see how ridiculous this sounds, which is great. But on the other hand, they're feeding into that paranoia or hatred or discrimination, and it can lead to people getting attacked or, deported if the policies change. So we have to be careful not to enforce that. Like, people are not eating dogs.
I think that if this had happened before Trump, the outrage would just be like pure horror. But I think that we've already suffered through one administration of 4 years, and in the past additional 4 years, almost I guess 8 years now, we've just heard this horrible rhetoric against immigrants that I actually do, like you said, I like that people have reclaimed it, because it's so outrageous. And it's not just immigrants that are reclaiming it. There's allies who are also saying this is ridiculous. But you're right, there are people who will see this and think it to be true and not understand sarcasm doesn't really translate well sometimes, right? Unless it's in person, and even in person it doesn't translate well. But all I can do with my clients is show them a different side of the US, where the majority of people are very kind, gracious, and want to help. It's hard because in the one hand, I'm very proud of the US because we are so diverse. And I go to other countries where I'm visiting, it's so homogeneous, right? So if I'm going to South America, I stand out. It's very obvious. Maybe they might not think I'm American, but they know I'm not from South America. Although there are pockets, right, where there's big Asian immigration. But even then, we're always kind of easily seen as the other. And even here, growing up, unless I open my mouth, people will ask me where I'm from. And I'll say, with my Texas accent, I'm from Texas and born and raised, y'all. Like, what's going on? I get what they're trying to say. It used to bother me that they would say, well, but what are you? And when I was little, didn't comprehend that. In elementary school, like, I'm American. No, but where are your parents from? Well, I'm Chinese, right? My dad's from Taiwan, my mom's from Hong Kong. But that I think that maybe people are maybe more cognizant of it being a bit, not maybe intentionally, but could be a bit rude. But I just know what it's like to just automatically be seen as potentially not from here. But on the other hand, I love that there are so many different groups of people from all over the world that are here, and there's pockets of them everywhere. So I have a very diverse clients. I have clients from all parts of the US. And whenever something happens, I just let them know that I've experienced it. It doesn't matter. It will exist everywhere, right? But deep down, folks aren't all like that. You'll meet a pocket of them every once in a while.
I love that you mentioned how beautiful it is actually to have diversity, because I come from a country that is very homogenic in that sense. There is one ethnic group that is the largest after the war ended. There is one religion that is the most dominant. Everybody is white and all of that. So, but now they are having some immigration from different parts of the world. People who are coming to Croatia for better life too. But some people are then reacting to it because they're not used to it, to see people of color walking in the streets, which is their full right, and they should be living their lives and work their jobs and all of that. But still, some people have prejudices and all of that. And when we came here to Canada, I was so happy and pleased and so proud and inspired by diversity. Because in my cohort at PhD, most of us are coming from different countries, from different religions, races, cultures, everything else, and it adds up to the discussions. We learn so much more because we can share our knowledge, we can share our experiences, some specific facts about our cultures and communities that we can share, and then we can together create some solutions to solve the problems, but actually solve them, not just try to patch some band-aid on it. but actually make a big difference because we're taking an intersectional approach. I love that in your practice you make sure to be intersectional in that sense, to remove class as a barrier, because most immigrants, especially newcomers, are already marginalized in so many ways, and one of them is financial situation. And for us too, it was so difficult that first year to make sure that you have a roof over your head. It's so easy to become homeless, to find yourselves in the streets, or in a very precarious situation that is hard to get out of. And then you need help, but you have to pay for that help. So the people who need help the most are the ones who can't get it, because we have that, you have to have this much money in your wallet to be able to play. And I love that you're doing something to change that, to provide people the chance that they need and deserve.
Be a professor and teach the next generation of immigration attorneys, and also have that clinic there that I can refer folks to. So I recently had a consultation with someone who was referred by a previous client, and it's an LGBT asylum case, and he doesn't have work authorization. I know he doesn't have any money. And I said to him, I was like, look, I don't think you can afford me, and I wouldn't even want to put that burden on him. But I said, look, I'm going to fast track you and try to get you through the law school clinic. He just had his intake this week with assigned 2 students to him. And so I'll take the lead on that case, and I will technically be representing him, but it's for free. And I can't do that for everyone, but even in situations when you were talking about how hard it is when you first come here, I remember growing up hearing stories from my mother and father saying when they got married, they all they could afford was like a mattress, right, in their apartment. And I fortunately never had to worry about that kind of stuff, because by the time I was born, my parents were running their restaurant. But I also saw the hard work that they put in there, where I spent a good portion of my childhood at the restaurant and working there and being little, and that's why my math is better. I was taking people's money and trying to calculate everything. So I know how hard it is financially. I let the clients know that I know the agreement says if you miss a payment, I got to charge you something. But I tell them, I'm like, look, if you can just give me a heads up, just tell me ahead of time, Tammy, my car broke down, I can't pay this month, I'm not going to charge you. I just want communication. That's all there really is. And they pay me. When I started out, my friends made fun of me, but it was $50 payments a month, which my friends said I need to be able to survive as well. So I've upped that a bit, but I'm also just very understanding about the more that they can get their immigration status fixed or get their permanent residency, the more likely that they can be more stable, and then they'll pay me. I know they will. They all eventually will pay me, which is fine. But yeah, no, that early journey, again, I may not have lived it, but I've seen it through different aunts and uncles and cousins that have immigrated here. And I understand it. So I try to hope that is genuine when I convey that to the clients, and that they know that I'm here for them.
That's beautiful. And what are some other barriers that we can fight against or tear down that would help people who are immigrating get the help and support that they need? So some policies or practices or supports or whatever.
Talking to y'all when you were immigrating to Canada, because it seemed so much easier and efficient, and they gave you resources. You still have to do the legwork, but they provided that for you. In the US, and a lot of it is based on the concept of being an American and being independent and working hard, but there's not a lot of safety net. And people may come here and immigrate here because a family member applied for them, but it's reliant on that family member here to get everything together. They don't get a list of places for housing or services available to them. They have to figure that out themselves. So I think that's a huge barrier, especially with the language, right? But what I've seen through my years of doing this is the different communities that build up. Maybe you'll only have a small group of Cubans coming to San Diego, but now we have a very large Cuban community. And so the next one that comes in gets help from the one before to say, oh yeah, no, I went through this. Here, go to this person, do this. Did you go talk to this agency? That kind of stuff. So in the void of maybe the government not doing it, there are people that come in both in the community and then the NGOs to kind of help navigate. But you know, the asylum seekers in the US, it's very different than in Europe and even in Canada. They get no assistance in terms of housing. So I've had clients when I worked at the nonprofit who were homeless and were living in homeless shelters, but I was having to find another organization like Survivors of Torture who had case management to help him try to find housing. And everything is reliant in the United States with having a social security number, which is basically like our version of an ID number, right? But they can't get work authorization when they first get here. So they can't get a social security number, which means they can't get an ID, which you need an ID to be able to get benefits. So it's that catch-22 of where do you go first to try to solve it? But that's why with the asylum seekers, I worked with refugees a lot too. Asylum seekers always have a special place in my heart because I know how hard the struggle is, because they don't get anything handed to them. They get no assistance, no public assistance. And it's not an easy journey, especially now and after the last administration. It's a very long, a very tough journey. So when folks have other options, I'll have students come and ask me, Tammy, things are bad here. I can't go back. What should I do? I want to apply for asylum. I say, try the other options first. Asylum's the last one. It's like your backup when everything else fails. But it's not going to be easy. And people are separated. You know, it could be 6 to 10 years where they can't leave the country and can't see their family. So I try to make sure they understand the realistic expectations of what they're going to be involved in on the asylum side of it.
Yeah, I had no idea about it. And I mean, the problem with experiences of refugees and asylum seekers is those are people who didn't plan to move. They were struck with unexpected situations that proved very dangerous for their life, so they had to flee. So they didn't have, like, we planned for years to come to Canada. We applied a year earlier for my studies, and then we applied for a visa, everything in time. We had to travel to other countries. Like, it was a process and it was complicated, but it was on our own terms, and we were the ones who were in control of it. So we were privileged in that way. And I can't imagine what people who are trying to flee war in Middle East, or who are trying to flee war in Eastern Europe and in Africa, what they are experiencing, because they're already experiencing trauma. Their whole families are in danger. They want to leave that place because they deserve better, but they didn't have time to prep. They didn't have money to save, and now they have to figure it all out. And they come to the other side hoping for a better life, and they come to nothing because there is no support for them. And yet people believe on this side of the world that people who come here are stealing their jobs, their houses. They're the ones who are making it all worse for them. And no, those are the people with the least amount of social power, agency, or anything else. And those are the ones who need to help the most, and not like exclude them or not let them in.
I relate to them in saying that my mother's side of the family, they were wealthy in China, but my grandfather was in the military and fought against the communists. So they lost everything. And I've seen photos of where they lived in Hong Kong, and it was in these shanty towns on the side of a mountain, right? So they went from maybe being upper class to being very low class, and starting over again. And I don't think people understand. No one chooses to uproot what they know in their life to just lose everything and start over again. It's exhausting. I am exhausted just moving from like one place to another, right? Like we were talking about moving earlier. Like I moved into my house and I really don't want to move again. I'm too lazy. I wouldn't want to do that. And I've lived all over the country. I've lived in other parts of the world. It's exciting. It's fun. But at a certain point, as you get older, because I am older than you, you just want some stability, and you just want a place that's yours. And that's what most do. And what is inspiring is the sacrifice that a lot of them make, knowing that in their lifetime, maybe they might achieve, but they get to see that their kids do, right? Or the next generation. And on my mother's side of the family, she was the oldest of five. All of my cousins and I, we all went to very good universities. And, so within a generation, it's a universal story. It's just that unfortunately, I think people that are against it are just, it's being scared of the other. It's being scared of something different. But then when you talk to them deep down, or they meet someone that is an immigrant, I don't know how many times or where I've had folks say they're very conservative, and they say to me, hey, can you help me with my gardener? He's such a good guy. He's been helping me for 30 years. It's just so unfair. Why can't we get him some kind of legal status, And I have to explain to them it's the laws, and it's because it's been politicized. And what we need is actual legislators in Congress who can do something about it, because they're the ones, they haven't changed the laws since the 90s. And in the 90s, I don't even know if you were born, but I think I was in elementary school. My mother made me get a perm, so it was a long time ago. And what I tell my students now is, I know we all use Windows if we use a PC. Imagine running Windows 93, but right now. I was like, none of the programs will work. Nothing will work. I go, that's basically what the immigration system is right now. It just needs an update, but it's been politicized. It never should be.
I love that allegory. I have never heard somebody compare immigration policies to computer programming, but it works perfectly.
Like, you can't. I don't even know what Windows number we're at now, but that's what's wrong. When people are like, oh, the immigration system's broken. No, it's very outdated. Like, it was working. You need to upgrade it, and we have it. So,
and what are some of the issues, or who are the people who are coming to your clinic for help? Like, what are they struggling with? What policies are in the way of their rights?
A wide variety. At the law school clinic, we have focuses on, there's a women's clinic as well. So we get a lot of referrals. There's a housing clinic. We get a lot of referrals. What could be that maybe someone's undocumented and the landlord is using that against them and going to raise their rent and not at a reasonable rate. The person complains, and the landlord threatens to call ICE, which is our Immigration Customs Enforcement, the police of immigration, to threaten them. Then when they go to the housing clinic, the housing staff might say, hey, they're undocumented. What kind of stuff might they be eligible for? They come to us, and then we have our students do an intake. We discuss it in class. We talk through what options, and maybe they don't have anything, but the best feeling is when we find out, hey, they actually might be eligible for this one type of relief. It's a long wait, but eventually maybe we could get their status fixed, right? Lately, at least in my private practice and a bit probably in the clinic as well, a lot of LGBT asylum needs from different countries, South America, Central America, but even, Middle East, everywhere, like just a lot of increases of bad laws or bad politics or mistreatment of the LGBT communities in other parts of the world. It's a lot of everything. I think there's also in the law school a clinic that deals with workers. Same kind of MO you're seeing when it comes to housing, where maybe they're getting paid under the table and they are being taken advantage of because the employer knows that they don't have any papers. And so they'll threaten them with reporting them, so that we might have someone that initially comes in because of a worker's compensation or not getting paid issue, and then we get the referral from there to try to see if we can maybe help them.
Yeah, I'm glad that at least you you exist to help them, that they have some place to turn, especially people who are even more marginalized as immigrants than just immigration itself. Queer communities and women specifically are at risk of human trafficking, of sexual assault, of just abuse in the streets, because they have nowhere to turn to, especially if they're illegal immigrants, because you can't just show up at a police station and say you were raped if you don't have documents. You're gonna get deported and you're still gonna be raped and never get the justice.
There is a type of visa called a U visa, which is for victims of severe crimes. So if they do go, and part of the, it was passed through Congress a long time ago, but part of the understanding was we want folks to come out of the shadows and help their community. If they are raped, if they are robbed, if they are whatever, they make a police report and they help the police. It doesn't have to actually go anywhere. But if they are willing to come out and make a police report, they could potentially be eligible for a visa that will lead to permanent residency. But unfortunately, talking back about the system being outdated, it's limited 10,000 visas a year. So the backlog right now for this particular victims of crime is, I think, anywhere from 5 to 8 years for them to be able to, once they file everything, potentially be eligible then for a green card. You're right. I mean, it runs the gamut. The fiance visas. I think, actually, I think one of your questions was about 90 Days Fiance, right? Yeah. So I don't watch that show, but every class I always ask the students, and typically I get a handful of, students raising their hand saying they watched it. I actually asked, funny enough, before I even looked at your question, I asked my students this week, we were talking about something and I mentioned fiancés, and I was like, wait, do you guys watch 90 Day Fiance? And almost every single one of them raised their hand. So, if that gives them an intro into being like, oh, I'm interested in immigration, I'm all for it, because we need more immigration attorneys and good immigration attorneys. But it does worry me that it's made for entertainment, right? And in my practice and in my career, there are also people who maybe are trafficked through fiance visas. Again, hopefully, if they have any issues, they are able then to leave the abuser and seek out resources in the community, and potentially be eligible for other forms of immigration relief that they're not reliant. But I've heard of instances where even, amongst family members, they petition for people to come over, and then they hold it over the head of the family member and say, you need to listen to me, otherwise I'm going to report you. So that's always very disheartening. But, I think it just goes to show that if we could just update our immigration system, and maybe certain things that were passed in the 90s are part of the root causes of why the immigration system isn't running as well. Get rid of some of that stuff, I think we'd be much better, but it is what it is.
You mentioned that certain governments or presidents change some stuff and it can go in any direction. So you mentioned that there were some changes in the practices in immigration when Trump was a president. So what are some examples of how it got harder, and what do you suspect could possibly happen if he manages to win this election?
First thing comes to mind was he was inaugurated on January 20th, 2021, and the next day, I believe it was I do remember it was a Saturday, was the Muslim travel ban. So, woke up to that news. I think it was just a huge surprise how immediate it was. And we saw a lot of attorneys mobilize, at the airports, because you mentioned it. You had planned for years your immigration to Canada, right? All the stuff. Same thing happened to these folks. They probably planned for years and were coming to the airports and then being turned away, all because of what countries they were from. From day one, we knew it was going to be a tough battle. 4 years of just constant proclamation by tweets, lawsuits, stopping it, starting it, it was whiplash. Everything they could do to make things slower for processing, they tried. And if they couldn't get the policies through, it was very much a concerted effort to kind of throw a wrench into the overall immigration system to make it work less efficiently. And I think under Biden's administration, I think it's just now getting closer to where it was before the Trump administration. So probably the first year or two was reversing and putting things back to the way they were, hiring more people because they were not hiring people to fill these positions to actually process these cases. So it's still felt now, and this is why cases that maybe used to take a year or less, maybe on average are taking 2 to 3 years. And what people forget about immigration is they hear immigration, they think, oh, bad, good, whatever it is. It's people. At the underlying thing with immigration is it's people. So these delays impact families who are separated, and maybe they can't afford to go fly back to their native country to see their wife or their kids or whoever. So fortunately now we have FaceTime and we have the internet to be able to talk to people, but it's hard on people, or they're trying to bring their elderly parents here, and what should take about a year or so is taking 3 or 4 years, and parents' health are bad. So I don't know how many instances during the last administration where even with the travel ban, trying to get people's parents here, and they're my clients are US citizens, and the parents end up passing away before they could even get here. A lot of that blame, I think, is on the previous administration's concerted effort to just stop immigration. I think that they did that with asylum. They did that with cases that would have impacted women when it comes to domestic violence. And we're seeking protections because maybe their country has no protections for folks that are domestic violence, survivors. I think that if there is another Trump administration in the new year, I think that the immigration system will be decimated. I think they know now how to do it. They spent the first 2 years trying to, but not really knowing to do it the right way. And I think when people are so impatient with the Biden administration on, well, they could have done more, they were trying to fix things and do it the right way procedurally so that it couldn't be overturned or stopped, which is what we had in practice to kind of at least hold back some of the bad policies that were going on with the Trump administration. I have a lot of colleagues I've talked to, older than me, same age as me, who have said that if he goes and wins the election, they're not going to practice immigration anymore because they're traumatized. There's PTSD, and these are very good attorneys with a lot of experience, but they just can't go through another 4 years. And I understand. I mean, y'all can't really see it, but my white hairs I have a streak of white hairs, and I really think it's from a delayed reaction to the Trump administration. I think it came out more probably in 2022 after, then it's like, oh, we can decompress and try to work with this new president. So I understand. I think it also was very traumatic to a lot of the folks that did immigrate here and having to go through the stress and processes of something that should just be running along efficiently like it always has.
Yeah, and one of the specific examples that I noticed, because it's my demographic that I belong to, are international students, and they're scared. And they're rethinking their choices, because why would you want to spend years preparing to come, spend so much money for the exams that you have to go through, the English second language exams that you have to go through, and all of that, to apply for a chance to get here, and then they let you know, no, even though you passed all of that, even though you're so brilliant and you deserve all the chances, we're not going to let you in. Or we're going to let you in, but we're not going to protect you when somebody attacks you, when somebody commits hate crimes over you, or commits sexual violence over you, because you're so vulnerable in that position. And people are turning away. US is not seen anymore as the ultimate choice for international students, because you're going to go someplace else where nobody's going to do a school shooting in your school or something. Like there are many things going to it. Canada being so close to the US is it's like contagious, that policies to immigration. And we've seen in this year, when we came here, the doors are closing down. Like there are no more opportunities for people. The number of people they are letting in is drastically lower than literally 2023. They are removing for international students, they're lowering quotas. They also said they will not be letting fiancés and spouses anymore on work visas except for PhDs and stuff like that. There were some exceptions. So we were lucky to get here at the moment where we got here, because I'm not sure, honestly, if it would be enough this year. They also put a bigger amount of money that you have to have with you on yourself while coming into the country. So for us last year we had to have 16,000 Canadian dollars for the two of us to come, because that was deemed as like an amount that is enough for housing and stuff for the first few months of living here. Now it's $20,000 for two people. That is a big big change. And considering that people are mostly coming from countries with lower standards of living, with lower average pay grades, it's harder to afford it. So you're putting again a class cap on who can come in, and that's so problematic on so many different ways.
I think that, the folks that are against immigration really need to just sit down and see what they're losing out on, right? Because I remember when we were on the Queen Mary, and I was like, why Canada? Why are you doing your PhD? Like, and you said, oh, I'm studying feminism. That's my PhD. And I was like, but why not Croatia? And you said, because there is no feminism in Croatia, so that's what folks are missing out on in other parts of the world, is this ability to educate or learn or do whatever work that might be missing out. And then what the countries like us or Canada are losing out are brilliant minds that can bring a different perspective and change things. You were talking about the diversity of things and the homogeneity of your country with religion, everything. Like, my dad grew up as a Buddhist. My mother, she grew up as a Methodist. When I grew up, they said to my sister and I, you guys do what you want to do. I lived in the South where there was a lot of Southern Baptists. I was recruited often to try to go to church and rallies. I went to a Catholic school for university where I think 80% of the students are Catholic, and I got to learn about that. And when I worked at the nonprofit, I worked for a Jewish organization for almost 9 years. So I can talk about, Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah and all this stuff. I like that. And I, may not know a lot about each religion, but I know bits of it that I like. There's parts of it that I like of each religion. And my clients, I can talk to them about these things. I have clients that are Muslim. I have clients that are Baha'i. There are some religions I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. Never even heard of a Zoroastrian until I started helping one. I would hope that those folks that are anti-immigrant, which I know it won't, it's like when people have to hit rock bottom to understand, they have to learn on their own. There's something that triggers them to say, hey, this anti-immigrant feelings, I'm wrong about this, right? That is what we lose, is the brain power that powers the US economy or Canadian economy, and all the big companies and this innovation. A good portion of them are foreigners. They are folks that immigrated here. And even my own family, at one point, my parents, in my lifetime, they owned at some point 3 restaurants. And the statistic typically is 1 in 3 restaurants succeed. So 2/3 of restaurants will fail. And my parents are able to get 3 out of 3 to work and put me and my sister through college. And I, was provided well. Like, we were probably, I would say, maybe like upper middle class. Like, there was never anything that I never worried about food. I never worried about, any of that kind of stuff. But I think part of the reason why immigrants provide so much is maybe it is an issue with language. And maybe it is that they were highly skilled where they came from. My dad was apparently, I didn't only recently learned this, was a veterinarian in Taiwan, specializing in pigs and swine. I thought he went to school and wanted to be a veterinarian. I didn't actually know that he was a veterinarian. But to do that here in the US would take years to try to get the same licensing, right? So he ended up being the chef at our restaurants. And a lot of it too is luck. But the reason why so many immigrants maybe are forced to start these own businesses is because of lost opportunities because maybe people are like, oh, they're an immigrant, I don't know if I want to hire them. They are more likely to open up businesses and to be the small business owners, which hold up a lot of countries in terms of their economy. And I think people forget that. I don't know how my parents did it. They worked tirelessly for 20 years, only 2 days off a year, Thanksgiving and Christmas, my whole life until they retired when I was in college. So my mother and father, my mother was 54, my dad was 58. Or no, 57 when they retired, which is amazing. Like 20 years, but they worked nonstop, and I am in awe of what immigrants do and how hard they work. And I know a lot of it also is luck. And I think the more people can go out and experience different aspects of their community, the more they might understand. So when I was in law school, I volunteered to be a mentor to a fourth grader. And kind of the more this area of San Diego called City Heights that has more immigrant children. And one of the little girls I helped was Cambodian. And she would tell me about she's in fourth grade, how she would watch movies like Saw and like all these horror movies. And I'm like horrified. I'm like, you're in fourth grade, you should not be watching that. Meanwhile, I'm pretty sure in fourth grade, my sister took me to see Nightmare on Elm Street. But I was asking about her parents, and she said her parents worked like 2 jobs, and at night they were working, and maybe one would stay home with them, but they were kind of just left to their own devices to go to school and do whatever. And a lot of it is luck. And I'm fortunate that my father, after my mother passed away, we've been very close, but we talk about it all the time. You can work really hard and you can succeed in the US or elsewhere in Canada, but a lot of it is luck. And I've had family members open up restaurants and they weren't nearly successful, right? And I think that the folks that forget that, because a lot of people ask me, how can people that were immigrants be so anti-immigrant or on immigration? And I think a lot of it is, in their minds, they may forget, like, yeah, I did it. And the thought is like, I came as an immigrant, I did it, I succeeded, everyone else can. Yes, it happened to you, but it could very well not have, right? And a lot of things in life, they don't want to see it that way, that maybe they were just in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that is super important. Like, we have to highlight that because America is usually sold through the American dream. Anybody, through enough work, enough dedication, enough resources, you can do anything. Like, it's the land of opportunity. But depending on if you're able-bodied, if you're maybe neurodivergent, if you're of a specific race that is getting discriminated, or a woman or a queer person or anything else, you have more barriers in that success. You have to travel the same path, but your path is more difficult. So it's not okay to assume that everybody who failed is lazy or not deserving, or that's what had to happen to them and things like that. No, like, we should actually see that as a space in which we can improve to offer people chances that they actually deserve. And I truly believe that, and especially, the irony of countries like the US who are selling arms to countries around the world to fuel war, and then feel like agitated when people flee those wars and come to their home country for a better life. Like, you should be welcoming them with open arms because you're the reason why they're coming here. You're the one who made their life unbearable. And also, I want to go back to the point of things that people get, like the enrichments that people get in life because there are immigrants around them. Food is a great example, like the fact that your parents had a restaurant, the fact that, here in Canada, I can walk on one street, I will have a restaurant that is like a Vietnamese restaurant, then I'll have a Japanese restaurant, then I'll have some Mexican restaurant, I'll also have a Turkish place. Like, it's everything everywhere, and it's so beautiful and rich, and you can choose so many stuff, you can try so many stuff, meet so many amazing people all over the place in one street. And that's how it should be.
There's a weird disconnect where they may say, oh, in DC, they have very good Ethiopian food. It's known for their Ethiopian food. But people might be proud of it, but also have this disconnect of, but we don't want any new people coming into our country, right? And the strangest to me are, again, the immigrants who came, Vietnam or Iraq or wherever because of conflict in their countries, and then they vote against their own interests. And they say, well, all these people coming at the border, I don't like that. Well, but you were resettled as refugees after the Vietnam War. And I that is always very hard for me to understand. But I think I don't know why. I don't know why, but it always happens like that historically, right? So in the US, it was the Irish at one point. Then it was the Italians that were discriminated against. And then as a Chinese American, the Chinese Exclusion Act was the first legislation in the US that said this specific type of people are not allowed to be here. And it took forever for that to be repealed. Even though they were using Chinese labor, and part of the growth of the economy in the West, the gold mines or the railroads were all done by foreign labor. It's the same thing. I do try to stay optimistic that eventually, with each generation, because we are getting more diverse and intermingling, that maybe that type of attitude will lessen with each generation. So, but it is hard. And I know, remember some of your questions about, being a woman and then the practice of law and immigration and everything. It is harder. I think and I've talked to my students that are women. I've talked to my interns in the past where we deal with folks from a lot of different parts of the world where maybe it's a patriarchy more so. So they may trust you as the attorney, but they may not. They might make your life a lot harder because they second guess everything. And so part of it is learning as I got older and doing this is a bravado, right? A confidence of, I am the attorney. I will speak now. You're going to either listen to me or go hire someone else. I don't need this, right? And it's a skill, but I think it's very hard for a lot of women sometimes because I think each generation they're a little bit more confident, but we don't want to rock the boat. We don't want people to be mad at us or upset with us, right? And so what I try to remind folks is, does the other side care? No, you have very overly confident men who maybe aren't as good as you are, but they're just so overconfident about it, right? So we need to be able to kind of bring out our own bravado. And that's something you learn. And even as a new attorney, and being Asian and looking very young for my age, it was hard. I don't know how many times I would have folks in my office. I would explain all the legal stuff, and about 30 minutes in, they'd look around. I'd see them look at the diplomas and everything, and then they'd say, "Wait, are you the attorney or are you the paralegal?" And it's like, I've been talking to you for half an hour. Like, so I combat that very early on, and I say to them, "Hi, never met you. I'm the attorney. I know I look young, but you want me to put my glasses on? Does that make you feel a little bit more confident in me? Or I'll like, yeah, I'm like, look, okay, how's this? Is this better? Does this feel better for you?" So you have to figure out your own way of doing it. But even in court, it is a journey. There are more women now that I see as judges, which is great. I think when I started in San Diego practicing at immigration court, there was maybe 2 female judges, one in detention and one non-detained. And now there are so many more women judges. And I think that's great. Not that there's anything wrong with having male judges, but it brings a different perspective on these cases for them, right? Life experiences. And even as an Asian woman, there are not a lot of us doing court it's very adversarial, it's very aggressive, it's very exhausting. And some don't want to handle that. They just want to deal with very transactional work. But I'm slowly starting to see some younger, new Asian attorney women. And the easiest way to kind of convey that is, I hadn't been in court in a while. There's a security guard that's been there forever. And I was like, hey, how's it going, Oscar? And he's like, Tammy, I haven't seen you in a while. And he mentioned there was another Asian attorney. And he's like, oh, there's this new Asian attorney, this woman, like she comes around a lot. And I'm like, oh, I think I know who it is. Like, you know, but it's just like, the guard sees it. He's been there forever. And there's an immigration judge who is also Asian. She was a government attorney when we were both kind of younger attorneys. And I saw her the other day and I told her, I go, I still think of the situation one time when I was a newer attorney. She was working for the government. And I said hi to a male colleague. I was like, hey, how's it going? And he's like, hey, so-and-so, not saying my name, but the name of the government attorney. And he misidentified us because she was the only other Asian. And I was like, no. And you could see it. It clicked in his head. He goes, oh my God, I'm sorry. Tammy. Hi, Tammy. And later I told the now judge, but at that time attorney, the story. And she laughed because she's like, we don't look anything alike. Also, I'm for the government and you're with defense, you know, but now she's an immigration judge. So I think it's good to see. And in my own students, I have a number of young Asian women. And I think it also helps when they go to school and they see that there is someone like them that is doing this work. And it's true. Like, it goes back to my joking about wanting to be a journalist and mother saying there's only one Connie Chung because she was the only like well-known Asian anchor, and it's not you. Right. But now we look and there's tons of Asian anchors and reporters and everything. So it takes time. So that's why I still try to stay optimistic with each generation that it's not as unusual, but it is hard. It is harder as a woman and in every respect.
It's an Asian woman specifically because of that intersection, and then the Asian immigrant woman, the more identities that you put in, the more difficult it can get, and you have that burden of representation. You are sometimes considered a token. Somebody sometimes commits racism, not even noticing it. Like they called you by different name without even thinking about it. That perhaps it's not just one woman like who fits into your identities who is working that job. And I appreciate that you also mentioned judges, because sometimes when we talk about law, for example, and women in law, people say, no, we had such great improvements because we have women practicing law, we have women starting their own companies and stuff like that. But still, just like in any other industry, the higher you go up the ladder, the less women, the less any minority you will see. And then you will end up with that one old white man at the top, and that's it. And we need to change that. We need more women in Supreme Court. I mean, we saw literally 2 years ago what happens when a woman dies and leaves the Supreme Court. How fast laws that were in place for almost 50 years just disappeared and opened the space for further discrimination, for violence over women's bodies. So it's very important that we have advocates for our rights, not just for like women's rights or for queer rights or for immigrant rights, but people who actually see people who are there trying to protect and do everything they can to actually do that, not to favorize one group over anybody else. Like, nobody is above anybody else.
That different perspectives are very important. There's a commonality amongst women of certain things we all have to go through. We all have to go through apparently menopause eventually, and we all have to deal. We have these womanly experiences that men just won't understand, right? Same with the LGBT community, where everyone has a different coming out story, or maybe they're not coming out. Maybe they're still very firmly in the closet, but the different perspectives help us to be better people. And I think about this. I remember one time I was in college, there was some news story or report that was in depth about Chinese girls, like baby girls in China, and how many of them were abandoned or killed or anything like that. Maybe I was PMSing at the time, I don't know, but I do vaguely remember crying hysterically watching it because it hit me, and I thought, how lucky am I that that is not my fate because of the country I live in, and it's circumstance, right? I was just born here. That doesn't mean I'm better than anyone else, right? But I think that that gets lost on people. I am an American, and when people used to ask me when I was younger, what are you? Like, well, I'm American. Where are your family from? All this kind of stuff. Deep down, I was like, I'm an American. That's at a certain point, it changes. And then you learn someone's making fun of you in elementary school because you're Asian, right? And you start realizing it. But there are, still instances where now it's really nice to see that maybe that with the younger generation, they don't even notice it as much, right? They say, yeah, my best friend, like, he's half black, whatever. It's not a big deal. It's the difference between, like, I'm not saying that it should be like racial blindness or anything, but it's just not something that's attributed to having, it's just everyday life. And we see this still playing out, like Kamala had said, same old playbook, right? Where Trump had said, I didn't even know she was black. She's never said she's black. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, so we won't even get into that, but basically I think that perspective is very important, and the earlier people can get it. In part of my schooling, my Catholic schooling when I was at university, was this importance of social justice, and they would have programs where it'd be like a 48-hour immersion in the kind of inner city of where you're from, and you would learn from, meet all these organizations, and you would see, like, I may be from a suburb where things are very clean and cut and just manicured lawns and all that stuff, but then we would go from house to house for Meals on Wheels and meet a lot of seniors that don't have air conditioning in Houston, and this is what they rely on for their meal. And you have a disconnect until you see it. So it also frustrates me when you'll hear some conservative kind of dog whistles and things like that of, oh, our major cities look like third world countries and things like that. One, they probably have never left the country and had experiences elsewhere. And also, two, homelessness is not just an American issue. It is everywhere, but at least we're trying to help. But unfortunately, in some countries, maybe third world, they're not trying. They can't. They don't have the capacity to be able to help. So you do see it even worse. But there is nothing in the US when people make these claims that are like third world countries. Like, we have pretty much good water quality. We have running water. Like, so it really infuriates me when I hear these things. And also with my clients who are from a lot of countries where it is amazing to them indoor plumbing, right? We are very lucky in the United States. And I think people just keep looking at the negatives of things. And especially after my mother got sick and passed away 13 years ago, really try to focus more on how fortunate I am and how fortunate I am in this country. Despite what we're going through with the election and the last administration, I still need to have some faith. I mean, I'm worried as hell, but I still need to have faith that majority of Americans will come out of this dark period.
Yeah, and there is actually a minority of people who are discriminating, who are full of hatred, who learn to hate through who knows what types of socialization, patriarchy, nationalism, you name it. There is very little of them. They're just very, very loud and very, very confident and arrogant in their beliefs, and they believe that everybody else is just like them, so they are seeking that approval. So they will publicly state some stuff just to see if everybody else is feeling the same things. but most people at least are neutral. And we need to somehow like make those people who are neutral actually step up and speak out to say, no, I'm actually not with you. I don't hate people. I don't believe that some people are worth less than me. I don't believe that just because I was born here, I have more rights than anybody else. Like, or just because I'm a man, or just because I'm white, or whatever. Like, those people who are currently silent, who are providing extra space for those few who are very loud to be heard even more, we need to change that. People need to go out and vote. People need to go into the streets and protest, or just if you're experiencing some type of microaggression, either racial or sexist or whatever, we need to show like compassion, we need to show empathy, we need to support people who are hurting. Fun fact, the only people that me and my husband heard the sentence "go back home" was from other Croatians. Which goes back to what you said earlier about how sometimes immigrants are the ones who try to gatekeep. Like, yes, I came here 10 years ago, 20 years ago. A lot of people from Croatia specifically came either after Second World War or after our war that we had 30 years ago. So they are here for a while. There are a few generations now. They have their own churches and, you know, community buildings and all of that. So of course, when we couldn't get a job, when we weren't sure, you know, where to get our groceries and stuff like that, because you don't know anything. You came into a new world in your mind, and we reached out on Facebook to people from Croatia, like Croatian groups. Hey, do you have some advice, tips? Where can we go look for jobs? Like, what should we eat and stuff? And the comments were predominantly people saying, go back home. We don't need you here. You're making things worse for us. Taking our houses, you're taking our jobs, you're ruining it for us who made something for ourselves here. And like, wait, what? I was so shocked. Yeah. Like, I did expect some type of discrimination from other people. Mostly that does not happen, I believe, mostly because I am white, so there is that white privilege in it, and I can't deny that. Yeah. Only when I speak out and people hear my accent, they go, wait, where are you from? Like, you're not Canadian, right? Yeah, I'm not a Canadian. But only then, when they see me in the streets, they just see me and think nothing, and they go live their lives. But the biggest discrimination that we got, the most hatred, was from our own community. And to hear that in your own language also, because they're not speaking English, they're speaking our language, and they're telling us to go back home. I'm like, what? And we need to change that. That should not be like that. Like, people should be here for other people, no matter where we come from, or how long we've been here, or how good it is for us, or how bad it is for us. We were very fortunate to have people here who listened to us, who just wanted to, you know, invite us for lunch and then hear our struggles, just to show us we are not alone. Because even though, yes, we are the three of us, my husband and our dog, the three of us are a unit, and it's much easier because we came here together, we're experiencing all of the struggles together, but we're still alone. There is no family support, there is no friends, there is nobody that you can turn to, so you have to build that network. And it means so much when people, you know, are first to lend that hand to support you. Like, it shows you that it's not that scary, it's not impossible, like, we can get through that together. And that's why I believe that the work that you do, and the work that you do, like, while doing your work, like those subtle things of providing people hope, of providing people opportunities to pay off their debts in a way that will not put them in any more dangers or risks of exploitation by other people, it means so much. And I'm so proud that you're doing that type of work, and I'm so happy that I was able to meet you. I mean, of all the places in the middle of the ocean, really.
I knew we'd be friends when your husband was listening with an iPod, and I was like, I'm listening with an iPod. You still have an iPod? That's great. iPods are great. I think they're getting popular again because you can hold so much music in there. No, but I agree with everything he said. I think that a couple of thoughts was, I think everyone's fed up. We're just, after 4 years of Trump, it's not even just Trump. You're seeing it in Europe. You're seeing it in South America. These folks that are trying to, like, be totalitarian, you know, strong men of sorts, and this, like, using just this, like, horrible rhetoric of racism or the other, and just, basically scapegoating people, I think people are just fed up with it. And part of maybe doing something is always just being willing to call people out respectfully, unless they're being very disrespectful. But the more you say it in a respectful tone, the angrier they get and the worse they appear. And, maybe shame will come back into popularity, and they will be shamed in terms of feeling like they're free to spew this hate. So I think more people are willing, to call out the bad behavior, or to say that's not right. As a collective, like you said, it's a minority, but they're very, very loud, and it does sometimes make people be complacent and say, I don't want to deal with that. But I think at this point, everyone's just tired of it. And I think we're seeing that, at least in American politics. Joe Biden put on a Trump hat when he went to a firehouse, and the far right is like, look at him, he's endorsing Trump. No, at a certain point, he was having a very, just collegial conversation with a gentleman who was a Trump supporter. Biden tried to give him a hat for the presidency. He's like, no. And he was like, why don't you take my Trump hat and put it on? And he wasn't sure at first, but he joked and he played along. Or I saw a photo of Biden with a bunch of children at the firehouse, and a lot of them are wearing Trump shirts. But you know what? He's the president for everyone, not just Democrats. And that's what we need is not fall into that trap. Call out the bad behavior, call out the rhetoric. We're tired of it. And also stop making politics a team sport of us versus them. I think that's what's really happened. And it's happening in other countries where the MAGA folks are like so feverishly making this like it's a football game or something. It is not a football game. This is our government, right? You can't run a government where you're just obstructing everything. And compromise is not a bad word. So I think my hope is, and my optimism, that the tide is turning. And we see a little bit of that even with France, and they, rejected a lot of the far right when it was the elections recently. I'm hoping that people will just say enough is enough, stop politicizing everything. This is not a team sport. If we're all Americans, and part of it is the Democrats saying we're reclaiming patriotism. We are patriotic. We love the American flag. We love the US. And that is almost, I think, at least with the far extreme right, that infuriates them even more. And I've seen clips of them saying, that's our thing. We like camo, we like hunting, and we like, and it's like, how is it that you get to just appropriate this? Like, let's take everything back. So I try to be hopeful, hopeful that it will. We have these historically periods where, you need this to remember why we don't want to be like that. And I'm hoping that on the immigration side of things, it will steer farther away from making it a political issue versus just it's just to help. I mean, we are a very big country. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not that someone comes in and then someone loses a job. If we're trying to grow our economy and continue to be, healthy economically, each person coming in brings in a new job, right? But they got to get away from this whole rhetoric of, oh, immigration, they take away our jobs. No, they're doing jobs that people don't want to do. You're telling me that someone wants to do what my parents did and work with no vacation and work, only take 2 days off where they close the business? No one wants to do that. But there are people that are willing to do that and sacrifice that. And no one really, I guess, for the ones that politicize immigration, until it actually impacts them, that's how people's minds change. And I think it's going to be more impactful as we call out the bad stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, we are fed up and tired of trying to explain all of the time, repeatedly, yes, those people are people too. Like, shocking. Other people deserve rights too. And even it's freaky how easily that language goes into like everyday life. Like we talked about 90 Day Fiance. I tried to watch one season of it, but it's called literally 90 Days Fiance the Other Way. And the sole fact that they named the show the other way because those are Americans leaving America to go somewhere else, they are reinforcing that idea of colonialism because yes, we have America, the ultimate ideal. So they're complicit in that fact that they believe other people should come to America because America is so great. So much that they made a show that is fascinating just because people are trying to go to Dominican Republic or Philippines or Netherlands and stuff like that. And like, no, it shouldn't be so wild. Like, immigration can go either way. It's very porous, it's very dynamic, and it's been like that since forever. We've had people come to a certain country and settle up life there, and then 2 generations later a child will say, no, actually I want to go back to my roots and figure that out, or I want to experience some totally other thing because that's my right too. And people should be allowed to do it, especially in this day and age with so many different transportation modes, so many ways of communication. It could be so cheap and easy to actually experience the world as a whole and not stay in your own village, in your own club, in your own Facebook group or whatever that is very closed and not welcoming to any new ideas or new people or anything else. And I believe that's the only way we can grow, to let in everybody in it, not just say, no, these are the people that we'll put on the pedestal and they have the rights to say to everybody else the lives that they will have to live. Like, what? And I also appreciate that you said presidents are presidents for all of the citizens and everybody else that lives in that country as well, because there are people who are not citizens but they're still there and they still have rights, or should have rights, better say. But that's something that, like, it's mind-blowing to me that people don't get it, that no matter who wins the US elections, the next day you might have to go for groceries, you might have to tank your car, you might have to go to school or, seek some healthcare or whatever, and it will be important to you who is in that place and who is making those decisions. And those people who end up being elected should not only represent the 30-40% of population that actually voted for them, they should represent everybody because they're everybody's president. And they're everybody's actually servant, because that's what public officials are. They're public servants.
I've always been interested in politics. Even in elementary school, I remember being interested in politics. And you're right. I think that it's just an anomaly with the previous administration, hopefully, that it's so extreme how partisan they made everything, of us versus them. And that's very unfortunate. I do hope that it will help people remember this is not what we want. I think that's the thing, is people do think they like, if someone benefits, someone else will lose. It's a sport thing, right? You can't have two winners in sports, but our lives in the government is not sport. And we can have things where it will bring up some people, and maybe that will also bring up the other people as well. And that's how we should look at it. And I think that's what's been lost. At the end of the day, even when I was younger and I was interested in politics back then, what do people want? They want stability. They don't even really want to think about politics in their everyday lives, right? They want to just be able to have things work. They want to be safe, and they want to make sure when they get on the plane door doesn't fly open, and they want to know that, there's regulation on things, that what they're eating is healthy. And when you go visit other countries, you may not have that. You may, have a scandal in a certain country where instead of it being formula for kids, it's actually the manufacturer put all this other stuff in because they're trying to make a profit, because that's all it is capitalism and profit. And but in the end of the day, like you had mentioned, getting their gas, getting the groceries, picking up their kids from school, they just want to live their life and enjoy it, right? And they should. I mean, life is very short. You never know what's going to happen. And I think with my life, my mother passed away at the age of 64. I was 31 years old, and she only had 10 years of retirement. She worked her whole entire life since she was 17, and got to retire early. 54 is very young to be retiring, but only had 10 years of it before she succumbed to stomach cancer, which unheard, like, you can't predict these things, right? So I think if we could get to a place where politics isn't something we have to worry about all the time, that means that it's a successful government, because that means things are running, right? And what we were getting with the previous administration was not a successful government, because it was constantly in the news, and it was one tweet after another of some other chaotic thing happening. And we're seeing it again now in the debates, where why are rumors of people eating pets? Like, how does that even come up, right? How does that even happen? So I think you're right. Everyone ultimately just wants to live a peaceful life. And we're not even talking about everyday Americans. It's anyone in the world. We just want to live a peaceful life. So a true government that works for you is one that can do that, let you have that without driving you crazy.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, it infuriates me that every time that we have elections in US, we also had elections in the EU Parliament, we had elections in European countries, like, particularly, and everywhere, every time we have the elections, certain rights come up, and we have to defend them. Like, oh yes, will we choose somebody who will say we are still recognized as people, or are we going to choose somebody who says these people are not recognized as people? Like, what? It's not fair that every time that we choose the government, we have to choose if women have the right for healthcare. We have to choose if people have the right to flee unsafe living conditions and move. Like, that shouldn't be the case. The things that should be actually in focus of such debates would be the actual policies that they want to implement to make everybody's lives better, because that's what we all deserve. But they're not focusing on that. They're focusing on divisions. They're focusing on who gets what at the expense of somebody else, as you said, because it's win-lose, not win-win. And that's far from truth. Like, the real world does not function the way that the media and some specific groups try to make it seem like. It's not that black and white.
My parents opening up their restaurants didn't take away from some American that was a Native American opening a restaurant, like, or someone that was born in the US opening a restaurant. Like, we can all do it. We can all have opportunities. Just having one group have some ability to have an opportunity doesn't mean that it take away from yours. And I think the more we can kind of emphasize that, the more we can make it an abnormal thing to try to, like you said, politicize and divide. So I'm hopeful. Hopefully, I don't know. We'll see.
And what do you do when it all gets too much, when you need a break, when you're tired from, the policies, when you are drained from the emotional aspects of your work, because it's not just law, it's people, so there are emotions involved. No matter how much some will say that law is logical and rational and whatever, it's far from that, because it's actual people's lives. So what do you do in free time? What do you read, watch, listen to, do that makes you happy and that fills up your energy?
When I was a new attorney, fresh-faced, I took a lot of the emotional baggage of my clients, because I did also a lot of detention work. And I would go to barbecues on the weekends and then all of a sudden find myself wanting to cry because I met with someone that was the exact same age as me, who's been in detention for over a year from China. And I think to myself, if I was born there, maybe this would have been me, right? So it takes time, but I emphasize this with students as well and interns, is like you said, finding an outlet. So for me now, it's swimming. So even in the middle of the day, because I am my own boss, it could be like 2 o'clock. I don't have any appointments the rest of the day. I might just go to the university and swim laps and then come back and do some work. When I read, I don't read anything that is pretty much nonfiction. I have friends that love reading biographies and nonfiction. No, I am going to read any type of fictional book, mystery, sci-fi, fantasy, whatever. Like that's what I like to do. And even, in terms, I've always loved watching films and those little black and white classics and stuff like that. I stay away from certain topics that I know just will make me upset. So to this day, I have still not watched Hotel Rwanda. I know Hotel Rwanda is great. I've heard it's great. I've heard, wonderful performances. I don't need to watch it. I have had clients who've told me their personal stories about these things. So I will still watch some things that might be like that. But for me, give me a good comedy. Give me, any type of drama of some sort. I will watch those. Lately, although I feel like I'm a little bit behind. So I go to Comic-Con every year. My friends come in town for it. That's where I learn about different like animes and stuff like that. And then I'll be like, what's that? And my cousin will say, oh, that's from this one anime. So I was watching a number of like very popular animes and I'm like, oh, all right. So I was never into that, but now I am. But I do read a lot. Every night before bed, I read a chapter of whatever book I'm reading right now. But I think some kind of physical activity also helps. So before swimming, when I was younger, I did running. That really helped. Just anything to burn off kind of all those emotions that are stuck in the body. But even just walking around with our dogs. So when I walk around Millhouse, I make sure I used to listen to music or do whatever. I don't do that anymore. We walk around. He's an old man. He's almost 10 years old. I just look at things around the neighborhood. I look at other dogs that are barking. He's like smelling things. I find myself talking to him like, what do you smell? Is that good? All right. Okay. Like just whatever I can, but you just need to kind of just step away. Or go on a trip, get on a boat in the middle of the ocean with the dog. Whatever you can do to get away.
Yeah, I love it. Some of these are more realistic for other people to do than others, I believe.
Yeah, but some type of thing. Some people I know do yoga. I see yoga all the time. I just really like swimming because I can't even really think about other things while I'm swimming. I'm just like, all right, don't forget to breathe. How many laps has it been? Like, so every once in a while I'm swimming, I'll be like, oh yeah, I need to do this. But if I don't write it down, I forget, then it's fine, So, but yeah, for me, swimming, going to the ocean, the beach, that kind of stuff really helps. And just hanging out with friends, friends and family. My dad comes over every Sunday. We go to my backyard. We do some gardening. Right now, all the dragon fruits are being ripened. So now that's exciting for my dad. And then I get excited about dragon fruits and stuff. So I think as you get older, like just little things, just having that free time to just do nothing sometimes is really nice. Yeah. But boundaries are very important. And I think since I've gone into solo practice and teaching at the law school versus working at the nonprofit, I've been much better about boundaries where if it is after, business hours, I'm not checking anything. I try not to unless I know there's something I'm expecting. Weekends don't work. I used to all the time. Every once in a while I might need to because of a deadline, but I choose not to. And there are some days where I could do some work and I feel guilty that I'm not, but I think to myself, I think I'm just going to go. I'm going to go and do something else. So, and it again goes back to the fact that at the end of the day, life is very short. We don't know how much time we have here. Having pets reminds us of that because I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe Millhouse is almost 10. In the end of the day, you got to do what will make you happy.
I totally agree. And yeah, sometimes it's the pets that give us the unconditional love and make us leave the house. Remember us that there is real life, like, you know, that we have to touch the grass sometimes too, and stuff like that. And I love that you go to cons. For my birthday this year, I went for my first anime con here in Canada, so that was very exciting. And to see all the people, I mean, at one point I almost started to cry happy tears, because when you see hundreds of people in the same space, everybody's so different, everybody's so unapologetic in who they are, in their costumes, in their makeups, in the languages that they speak, and everything, and everybody's adding up to each other's experience. It just warmed my heart. I have felt the same way at that anime con that I did at Pride. So it's like that, that type of unconditional acceptance and safe space that is so hard to find sometimes. And I hope that this was just the first of many cons that we'll go to. I actually have to shout out one of the episodes that we will have of It's Just Feminism is about Indigenous Comic Con in Denver. They will have it in October, I believe. It's totally free and stuff, and it's, you know, it's a platform to highlight the efforts of Indigenous artists, Indigenous fiction writers and storytellers, and, you know, to showcase the plurality of their own methodologies that go into all of it. So it's very fun.
What the feeling is it brings about joy, right? Everyone, it's a different community, but it's being joyful in whatever everyone is into. And that's, you know, that's a good way. It's a good reminder. Street festivals, people all coming out, walking around, you know, I think it's just, especially a lot of people working from home, it's very easy for people just to stay very insular and not go outside and be around people. Yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, I hate people. They're the worst. It's just like annoyances, right? But at the end of the day, I embarrass my friends. I will talk to anyone and everyone. And, you know, it doesn't matter who they are, how old they are. And I'll figure out something with them, and I probably have a good story out of it. So.
I mean, we wouldn't have met otherwise. We would be just the strangers passing by the poop deck.
And now you're going to be on my annual Chinese New Year greeting card that I send, which is basically my dog dressed up as whichever animal of the zodiac it is.
Thank you so much. That really means a lot, to be able to learn about different cultures, to have the type of connection with people around the world. It's one of those things that makes life worth living, because we can learn so much from each other and support each other and make those little moments of happiness in everyday life mean so much.
And thank you for inviting me on this, and hopefully I didn't ramble too much about things, and there was some insightful things in there.
No, it's going to be a bit longer episode for sure. I still have one more last question for you before we end it all, and that is, if you have any type of message, a call for action, or anything that you feel important to repeat what you already said, or to say something that we didn't have time to mention, now is the moment for it.
About this when I was brushing my teeth today, because I thought to myself, I'm 44 years old, and I was thinking, I feel exactly the same. I'm the exact same person, but if I could convey something to my younger self, what would it be? And I think what it would be just do it. Just be confident. Why? What's the worst that can happen on things? And I think when I was younger, in my mind, and it's life experience and whatever, I would worry all the time about everything. Am I making the right choice? If I do this, then that, you just see all the different options available, and it becomes overwhelming having so many options sometimes. And what if I make the wrong choice? And what if my life goes the wrong way? And, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Sliding Doors, you chose the wrong path, or what would have happened. And what I've learned is, and I, even with friends the same age as me now, I just say, just do it. Let's first look at what's the worst that can happen. Worst can happen. You apply, you don't get it. You interview and they didn't want you. How does that, who cares? What is it? You didn't try, right? Just try. Of course, there's certain things that you have to think a little bit deeper. I'm going to jump out of a plane. cool. Okay, what are the risks on that? I've done it twice, but you have to look, but everything else, like, what is the worst thing that can happen? And if the worst thing actually isn't that bad, or you have other options available, like, why not just do it? And I think that also comes in terms of the community, right? When you see something, say something, call people out on their stuff. What's the worst that can happen? You see someone that's being very rude to someone else, are you just going to stand there and say nothing? No, call them out on it. You know what's going to happen? Maybe that person might direct their anger towards you, but it's no longer with the other person. And then now there's two of you guys to combat that. And the more people see that someone's willing to stand up, it's like how you deal with bullies. We've all dealt with bullies, right? People just need that one person willing to say something. And once they are willing to say it, other people come in and help. And I think just do it. Like that. I mean, now I feel like I'm a Nike ad when I'm just like, just do it. But I think as I get older, opportunities come up and I'm like, why not? Like, my career trajectory was not planned at all. And opportunities come up. So me teaching at the local law school happened because during COVID, I was reevaluating what I'm going to do with my life like everyone else. And my best friend in Seattle said, hey, University of Washington just posted something for a visiting clinician. You should apply for it. And I thought, why not? Maybe it's not forever. Maybe I'll go to Seattle. I'll be near my best friend. I applied for it. They didn't interview me, anything. Never got a call back. Totally fine. But what happened was I had asked the professor of the clinic here, who I knew through the local field, work, and I had asked her for a reference. And I said, hey, can I list you as a reference? Because you're a professor now. And whatever. So again, never had the interview, never even had an opportunity with the job up in Seattle. But because of that, she said to me, she's like, when you asked me that, I was like, oh, Tammy might be interested in doing this. And so she was already in her 70s and wanting to retire. And so when that happened, she told the faculty director, you should reach out to Tammy. I think she'll be great. She does court stuff. She does asylum stuff. That's what the students want. Interview her. And so I was approached for this job that I didn't even apply for, right? And it's all because I tried for something else and nothing happened from it, but it brought the awareness of this other person who said, hey, same thing with my job at the nonprofit. I applied for this other job, didn't hear from them because my Spanish isn't fluent. They passed my resume on to the nonprofit I ended up at. And they called me and they said, hey, I think you might be good for this job. So just at the end of the day, as much as I wish my mother was still here, I do take away the positive of the lessons I learned from that loss, which is you can't prepare for everything. My mother did not prepare that she would only have 10 years of retirement, right? And when she passed away, before she passed away, she was really sick. I remember her being so angry, not that she was sick and she knew her time was coming, but she was angry that she was not going to get Medicare. And in the US, when you're 65, you get government health insurance. And she was 1 year away from it. And that was what she was angry about, right? Oh, I waited so long and I missed it by a year. And she was just like, I paid into the system. But I was like, all right, that's what you're focusing on. But what did teach me my mother's passing is you can't plan for everything. You never know how much time you have left here. So just try to do good and take the opportunities. If it doesn't happen, don't take it as like the negative of like, they didn't even interview me. It will in the universe lead to other opportunities. You're putting it out there. So that would be what I would like to share with people is just try it. Like even for my students, some of them are like, I don't want to do courtroom work. Cool. Others are like, well, I don't know if I do or not. All right, try it. And some people, they do a case in court and they're like, I love it. And other ones do it and like, I hated it. I felt like I was going to throw up. I never want to do it again. But you'll never know unless you try.
I totally agree. Like so many things in life can come unexpected, both good and bad. And we have to make the most out of it. And sometimes even the wildest opportunities, like you can take a shot. Like yes, sometimes it might be some employer who will never reach back, but do you even want to work at a place that never reaches back to people? No, probably not. So that's a good thing. You dodge the red flag. I applied to here, like I spent all my life watching American TV shows and movies, and then you have that specific moment when kids come of age and they have to apply for colleges, and then you see all of that panic, the recommendation letters, the letters that you have to write about your own life, your grades, transcripts, all of that jazz.
Yeah.
And then I went through that process to come here, and it was like, is it even worth it? Like, it's so many years of preparing, so much money and everything, and for such a small chance to actually get in. I had no idea what the rates are, I had no idea what even the quota for people is going to be, how many people they're going to take in. But we were like, no, we want to move, I want to study feminism. I can try, I can at least apply, because if I don't apply, of course they will never let me in. So I applied and we got in on the first try, on my first option, which is mind-blowing to me and to people around me, because people will ask me, okay, but where did you else apply? And I will say, well, nowhere, it was like this or nothing. But that made us like work very hard for it, and now we cherish it all.
That could have happened, or you apply, you get in, you go to there, you hate it, and it's not what you expect. Okay, you quit, you go do something else, right?
Yeah.
But you love it, and you would never know unless you just took that leap of faith. Same thing. You know, when I applied for universities, I applied a lot of schools. I did not get into a lot of schools, but I was where I was supposed to be, because it led to other opportunities. And actually, my senior year of undergrad and university, 9/11 happened, and it was my fall semester. And I applied to law schools. I applied to so many law schools, and I didn't get into any of them. And part of the statistics then was when 9/11 happened, a lot of people, the uptick of people applying to law schools went crazily up. It was harder to get in. I was devastated. So 22-year-old me was devastated I didn't get into law school. And all my friends did. So they were going straight to law school. I took that year off. I waitressed. I reevaluated what I was going to do. I reapplied to schools where I realized I don't want to be in cold weather, and I do want to live in certain areas, and it all worked out, you know, and I look back on it and I'm very fortunate. I wanted to go to law school in the Bay Area. I was planning on it, but my mother convinced me to stay at home, live in San Diego, live with them, and I saved a bunch of money. So I paid off my school debts, all done. But also looking back on it, I was able to have a new relationship with my mother and my father as an adult versus as, you know, a child that never saw them because they were working. And after she passed away, even more appreciative that I had that time versus if I had left. So ultimately, this is what I think I drive some of my friends crazy. I'm like, ultimately things will work out. And, you know, when I was younger, I got a flat tire. I got bit by a mosquito. The universe is against me. I'm gonna, like, everything's awful. I'm just gonna hide. Like, I can't ever. The universe is not out to get me. And it's just bad luck, and it'll pass. Right. And so I think is very healthy because it's less stress. You can't control everything. I used to be a perfectionist, wanting to control everything. It's exhausting. And now I'm just like, it'll work out.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, one of the biggest failures that I thought that I had was when I was finishing my bachelor's degree, and I had one exam, and it was like, in Croatia it works like you have winter exams, you have summer exams, and then you have less chance to do the exams in fall before the classes start again. And I failed it. Just a second, okay? I'm just gonna give her the treats. I confiscated the culprit. We can continue. So as I was saying, I failed that exam, and I couldn't. It was the last exam. I couldn't enroll into master's degree because I didn't pass all of the mandatory exams. So I had to take a gap year for one exam, and it was like mind-blowing to me. Like that was the first time ever that I had a failure that was like so big that my plans had to change. Like I was supposed to go to MA directly, I was supposed to become a teacher in 2 years, like it was all very like streamlined. And then I failed. I had to take that gap year. It made me reevaluate what I'm doing, what I want to do, and I actually changed my majors. I turned from history to anthropology, which actually led me to my PhD, because on the first semester of that master's I read some work, some theory that was mind-blowing to me, and I finally found a theory that I can work with and create something of my own that inspired me to then go into research and stuff and apply it. And another thing that happened that year was 2019, so COVID started. So I was one of those lucky people who didn't go through that year, or that first year of online schooling, which was so all over the place and like horrible. And I just I started in 2020 when things got more like regulated and it was more stable and stuff. So my experience of online schooling was more like normal, and I didn't hate it as much as other people because it was not the same. And especially because I filled my batteries in that year. I did some like hobby stuff, I drew a lot and stuff like that. I gave myself permission to do stuff that I didn't do before because I was so focused on my studies, and I have to graduate by this year, I have to start working in my field in this year and all of that. Like no, stuff happens and you have to just figure out how to make most of it, and then with that go wherever you want to go afterwards.
I think with age, with perspective, and for me, with my friends as kids and students, the more I can convey that it's okay. Because, anyone that is going up the ranks of education, we all have plans. We're all driven. We all have ambition. And I still remember the first time I got a B+, that was in 4th grade. First time I got a C, that was in law school. Like, I remember all of these things, but does any of that matter now? No, none of that matters. For anyone younger, I try to tell them that just so that they can save themselves a little bit of the stress, but they have to go through it themselves.
Yeah, it's like a growing curve that you have to go through. And I agree. Like I remember my first C. My parents also remember that first C because it was outrageous, like a failure to get a C, and it was in English. And I remember that conversation with them and my own fears of I will never be able to speak that language. I will be the only one who will not know it and stuff like that. And then literally 15 years later, I had to pass the IELTS for academic purposes. And I did. And now I live in a country that is English speaking, and I use English on a regular basis, and I speak English with you. And yes, I know it's not perfect, and I make many mistakes, and my pronunciations and all that are bad, but I can still do it. See, from 15 years ago does not mean that I can't speak English now. And let me tell you, that proud moment of reconnecting with that teacher who gave me that C and telling her, oh, I'm actually moving to Canada in a year to study in a PhD level in English. That also felt very nice. Yeah, if you told me that, my husband was telling me then, you don't know what's gonna happen. You don't know what great things will come out of this failure. It will be what you make out of it and all that. And I was like, yeah, you're just saying that to make me feel better. I know I'm a failure. I know I don't deserve anything. I will never be happy. I will never fulfill my dreams. Like I was telling all the horrible stuff about myself. And now, like, I just look back 4 years earlier, 5, and can't believe, like, what's happening. Like, the fact that I'm even talking to you now, and that we met in the middle of the ocean, like, none of that would be possible without that failure.
Totally, that's awesome. Yeah, love it. I love all of that.
Yeah, I hope that this conversation inspired people to, first of all, think about immigration differently, to think about immigrants in a more humane way, to see how each of us can create any type of support or network for the immigrants to actually thrive in, to seek help if they need it, that even if we ourselves are immigrants, that we are okay to other immigrants, because as you see, not always the case. I hope that people will vote with their minds and with their hearts this fall in the US, and see, you know, what they can do to actually make sure that the country they live in is welcoming to everybody and supportive of everybody's dreams, because that's what an American dream should be.
And let's do this again. We'll do this after the election. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here today.
See you in Nymeria and Del Barto High, and yeah, don't be a stranger.
Have a beautiful day, and yeah, good luck with the rest of your work and with the elections and everything.
Well, it's good to see you. I'll talk to you soon.
And that will be all for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching, for sticking around for this bit longer episode. We had a lot of stuff to cover, a lot of, you know, personal stories, but also stories related to the politics of immigration and to the ways that people perceive immigration issues. I hope truly that this provided space for humanization, for a space for dialogue and for mutual growth that we can all be proud on. As always, if you enjoyed watching this, make sure to leave a like and maybe even subscribe so you don't miss on any future episodes. And of course, be kind in the comments. We did speak about some very controversial topics, but it does not mean we have to be controversial in our own opinions and ways of expression. And with that, I will see you some other time. Bye!